right, we're cutting across live to these latest visuals on our screen right now, where Prime Minister Modi has just now arrived. Remember, Prime Minister Modi is visiting Rome, Italy and the Vatican City between 29th and 31st of October at an invitation of the Italian Prime Minister himself. In Rome, the Prime Minister also will be taking part in the 16th G20 Leaders Summit along with other G20 leaders as well to discuss the global economic and health recovery from the pandemic. Sustainable development and climate change will also be discussed in this very crucial meeting. And these are the first images of the Prime Minister that has now arrived at the 16th G20 Leaders Summit along with other G20 leaders to discuss several other issues, including the global economic and health recovery from the pandemic. Let me now go across to our senior executive editor, Abhishek Kapoor, who's also joining us over the phone line. Yes, Abhishek, we have the first images now of the Prime Minister arriving at the 16th G20 Leaders Summit.
Well, yes, after this, there is going to be a session, a photo session, which is called Family Session, and Richa, and this is slated for about for a good 45 minutes, I believe. The G20 leaders would be exchanging pleasantries, meeting, catching up. This is more like an informal session, which is happening 10:15 a.m. to 11:45 a.m. Rome time, which is roughly about an hour and a half. So it's a longish informal engagement that happens between all the leaders. Remember, this is a big grouping. The heads of states and governments included about 30 odd, which is like G20 plus other organizations that have been invited and other observer nations that have been invited. Essentially, it's an economic grouping, so they would be discussing the global economic scene, the economic recovery post-pandemic, the fallout of pandemic, what needs to be done, what coordination, in terms of coordination, in terms of strategizing, in terms of policy making, influencing policies of other organizations globally. Prime Minister has made a very fruitful intervention last couple of months in G20. This is his own eighth participation in G20. And in fact, next year, India would be taking over the baton from Indonesia, which takes over from Italy in this summit. And it's important because a very big convention center is coming up, has been executed, and it's coming up by the Modi government in New Delhi, specifically for the G20 summit, of keeping in mind the requirements of a huge convention like that. So India is preparing for it. But then what is important is that Prime Minister has been closely involved in policy making at G20 level for some time now. For example, the issue of debt servicing by poor nations, Prime Minister influenced it in a manner that the poor nations of the world have got a reprieve of about $5 billion worth of debt, which they can delay insofar as their repayments are concerned. So also, for the first time, perhaps, given the fact that G20 is an economic grouping at the behest of Prime Minister, the Saudi Arabia, that is, they had convened a special meeting of G20 on humanitarian issues. So that's something which was different and innovative in the backdrop of the COVID pandemic. So in whichever manner every nation has contributed, they would be talking from their experience. So far as India is concerned, the most important experience is the pace at which we have really vaccinated 100 crore plus people now, over 105 crore. So far as the first dose is concerned, touching 20 crore jabs for both the doses. And that's a big achievement. Prime Minister always calls it the greater common good or the greater global good, given the fact that had we not vaccinated at this pace, it would have really affected the putting of brakes on the spread of the pandemic, because that much more that many more people and that big a population is now immune, and hence it slows down subsequent fourth, fifth, or whatever waves of the pandemic is spread. It's already sort of becoming an endemic worldwide, and we have to make sure that it phases out over the next year or so. For that, the vaccination drive, India's contribution in it, both in terms of research, in terms of logistics, in terms of distribution, in terms of making sure that there is equitable distribution, and more importantly, playing responsibly getting those vaccines out of India and sharing them with the rest of the world. In the first stage itself, not caring how much we are ourselves going to get. I mean, remember, every other nation has been really selfish, if I could say, in terms of making sure that they get those vaccines first and then distribute it. We were on our feet distributing them in the first phase itself. And now, of course, Indian vaccines are traveling around the world, for example, as part of the COVAX facility of the United Nations and WHO, and then, of course, as part of the Quad initiative in the Indo-Pacific region. So those are important contributions Prime Minister would be highlighting. Apart from that, there is some consensus building on climate change that has to happen. And for that, it's important that India's view that all these net zero commitments that are coming in from the developed countries, people understand that net zero has to happen coterminous with the idea of climate justice. So the nations that have traditionally been big polluters per capita have to adjust their emissions from here on accordingly. That's something which is not happening. Again, the issue of tech transfer to poorer nations to mitigate the disaster of climate change. All those issues, consensus building on that. G20 happens to be the most influential kernel of all other nations, the groupings that would come for COP26 at Glasgow in Scotland, the United Kingdom, where Prime Minister would be traveling from Rome. So those are important issues so that need to be discussed. And Prime Minister is traveling with a very high-powered delegation, which includes Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, of course, National Security Advisor Ajit Doval. So, I mean, nothing is amiss insofar as India's preparation is concerned.
Yes.
And you can expect that we would be influencing some decisions, not just at G20, but even at the Glasgow COP26, where Prime Minister travels from Rome.
All right. Thank you so much, Abhishek, for getting us all those latest updates. And even as we speak right now, the photo op with the G20 leaders is currently underway. The Prime Minister, after meeting Pope Francis, he has arrived at the G20 summit.